Welcome to Burn the Ladders. Today we've got Sammy. Sammy, I've never actually uh, asked you how to say your last name. Is it Sebok or Sebok?
Sebok.
Sebok. All right. So off to a great start already. Sammy is someone that I've talked to on Instagram for probably. You were following me way back in like the West Side versus the World,
I did the
fairly
music
early
research.
days. Yeah. But I feel like had we communicated like before the movie came out,
Maybe.
or has it mostly been after?
I think it's been like,
Okay.
I think it was before it came out, but it was like whenever all the hiccups happened with all the
Yeah.
stuff delaying it.
Yeah. Maybe one day I'll do an episode on that. It'll it'll probably cause a call for my lawyers. But so so way back then, so like a brief bit of history. So a decade ago, I was working on a powerlifting film. Obviously, I was a filmmaker back then. I was an athlete when I was young. That's how I got into all this. And my time around West Side is what made me really want to get into coaching. I did not know that at the time, but that was the funnest part of making West Side versus the World, was just talking to people about coaching and all the different ways that you can use, in particular, conjugate philosophies. And so I know like a decade ago, I wasn't thinking about kind of switching into really the like athletic focused space. Um, when what was your story? Because obviously it's only been really the last few years that we've talked about like training athletes. Before that, I knew you as a guy who liked lifting and liked West Side. So when did when did the athletic side of things come in?
So that was kind of how I was introduced to West Side. Uh, Way back, especially here in West Virginia, late 90s. It wasn't something that really hardly anyone knew about. And one of my friends is a little bit older than me, uh, had been lifting with a guy, and he came back after his first year of college, and he just like rolled up to the house. He's like, "Come on, we're gonna go lift." And so he took me to Coops, who trained me, John Cooper, and that's what they did was West Side. And I didn't know uh, what that was or what that meant.
Mhm.
I just knew that all of a sudden I'm in there and we got chains on the bar and we're using boards and we're doing all this other stuff. And, you know, in a couple months' time, I put 100 pounds on my bench. Dropped a couple tenths of a second off my 40. Uh, Getting ready for my senior year of football season. Uh, I'm glad that no one told me it didn't work for Raw. That way it was effective for me.
Yeah, well, no one had invented Raw yet, so
Yeah, yeah. So it worked still then for me. And so one of the things that Coop always told us is the only thing he asked of us was just to make people better than what we were. And
Mhm.
so when you go to college and you play a sport, and people have known you from before that you're training, and then when you come back and you have a degree in physical therapy, people start, well, can you help me? Can you train me? And people started to gravitate to me because of that. And so I trained athletes the whole time, on and off. But in 2020, it kind of just took off on its own and became a business, and that's where it became a more prominent and public part of my life.
Mhm. Um, yeah. So I've been a bad host here. So Sammy, the the reason why I bring you on, and especially so early, is in addition to just the fact that we've talked a fair amount over the last few years. Um, you you have some of the obviously I talk to a lot of coaches, and um, there's sort of a cadre of coaches who train like in a style that like really resonates with me or seems more similar to what I do. And of kind of that group, you're one of the lesser known people, but especially lately, you're one of the people who is pumping out results. And so I wanted to, throw what little shine and spotlight I have on on you. And additionally, and there's some other people who kind of have done this in a reminiscent way, like Zach Goodman. Um, you know, you're a guy who has like very quickly gone from like, you ask me questions and they're similar to the questions that other people ask me, but then very shortly thereafter you send back like videos of kids doing incredible things and sort of the application part of, because I've seen you do it with stuff that I've said, I've seen you do it with stuff that other people have said. You synthesize information from other people and like seamlessly integrate it into what you do to get like the learning curve from like being introduced to something to getting results that like are right in line with like the people who started whatever the trend were. It's just lightning fast with you. I'm trying to figure out a question or if I'm just complimenting you here. But so that's mainly the context sort of for the listeners. Sammy, despite being a guy who looks like, oh yeah, I'm sure he's powerlifted before. Um, you've got incredibly fast kids. You've got incredibly explosive kids. You've got a girl in particular who does like straight up freaky things in terms of results, and all out of, I've never really seen like where your gym is, like it, I know it looks like a whole lot of other people's gyms, relatively small, looks like a relatively hole in the wall kind of place. Um, Similar kind of to like Bird in the sense of like, I don't think you're in like a big metro super populated area where you can just cherry pick, genetic specimens.
No,
Um, you're, you're making like margaritas out of lemon over there. And I don't drink, so I don't really know if that made sense. But like you do the type of things where people on the internet look and instinctively want to go like, no, can't be real. It's got to be something's got to be off there. There's got to be, smoke and mirrors somewhere. Um, what like what is your training philosophy, and how like kind of quickly did you did you find that in terms of what you do like now?
so I started with very basic like the West Side style template, uh,
Mhm.
but going and do it, being put through that myself, and being taught that, and then continuing to learn it on my own and its application of like learning how to use it to powerlift and also learning how to use it as an athlete. One of the things that I loved was like, if there's a weakness, if there's something you're bad at, you address it, and kind of that you put things in a level of importance. And
Mhm.
so, as I start transitioning to being the athletes trained to training the athletes myself, I'm like, well, the important thing is they're running and they're jumping. So like I want that early on in the session. Like I don't want them to be fatigued. One of the things we did is a lot of times like we would lift and then we would go do like our sprinting and all the other stuff at the end. And not saying anything bad. Like I got great results, but you know, how can you get better results? And so like that was
Yeah.
my thought of reading this stuff that Louis talked about was like an order of importance within the training for what you wanted to do. And so I kind of started with that, like making sure that those things became earlier. And
Mhm.
then over the years of powerlifting myself, one of the things I learned and always tried to stick to was, you can't make too many changes too quickly, or you don't know what helped you or what hurt you. And so over the years, I've tried to uh, keep that in mind with my athletes when I change something. So, like one of the first things that I changed is, I seen, and this didn't happen until I started training a lot more athletes. And, we can discuss whether that's because of the difference in the way that kids are being developed and raised now. But it used to be like whenever I got an athlete, if we did certain things, they just got faster. And that meant like acceleration, top end speed, it just all improved. And as I started training more kids, back around 2020, 2021, what I seen was my kids were great accelerators, but like their back 20 did not meet and reach, their first 20. Like it didn't, it wasn't what you wanted to see. They weren't getting the 40s that, you would expect for the first 20. And so that's kind of how I came up on, I followed Bird for a while. I seen the kind of speeds that his girls hit. I'm like, if I can just get the speed that some of his girls hit for my people, like, uh, then we'll be doing great. And so that's, I reach out to him and we started implementing things at him to try to work on that top end speed. But it's one of those things like I think I've heard Jared talk about it before too. Like if the number isn't the right number, then sometimes like these schools or these places, it doesn't matter what the kids, you know, film is. Like if they don't have those numbers, then they're not going to get their opportunity. And I'm like, I can't have these kids, missing their opportunity because, we're not getting that, top end speed. And so that worked so well that it was kind of like down the rabbit hole further. Like, you know, I got to go visit Jarrett now because I want my kids to jump and bench and squat like that. And so it's just kind of been like that, one thing at a time, one person at a time. What can I learn from them that they do exceptionally well? And how does that best integrate into my program? And, you know, finding a way to apply those things and in a way that's balanced, that will give us results and without, you know, stacking too much on them.
I'm going to turn the do not disturb on. All right. Um, yeah, so that I think I do a similar thing too in terms of, I'm looking when I talk to people, I'm looking for like, is there a pattern of like statistically anomalous results? Like, is there clear evidence of, like in Bird's case, that again he's in a place where the population sample is so small, and then you notice like all of his kids have phenomenal top end speed. Um, it's like Louis says, like it's evidence of a system. Um, or Jared, so many kids who are just so brutally strong, and their jumps are incredible. And so yeah, you try and find like that, like what's the sort of like that one lesson or like that one thing that you can take from them, um like one concept or one like methodology that you can break down and put back into what you do. um and so much of that is very similar to sort of the arc of like how I learned things with that West Side template. And just kind of starting there with, for me, it was like the early 2000s, really. I'd heard about West Side and stuff through the 90s, but with my training, yeah, that general template, like it takes you so far. And at the time we didn't have any technology really to like sort of see where was the fall, like it was just like box jumps basically, like, and even then you were going up, at least an inch at a time, if not two or three to sort of like that next level. Um, what what was the first, like, I guess from there, was there a point where you started to notice, like, was it the integration of some sort of technology finally, or how do you even see? I mean, like, there's so many people that I still talk to, or gyms that I go visit, where to to have that idea that, like, oh, my kid's back ends aren't good enough, like, usually you can't even have that thought unless, like, you have to have some means to, like, identify that problem first. um what would, like, did you just see that through, like, some sort of timing system, or were you seeing that, like, out in the wild somewhere?
Yeah, so like you said, growing up, know, yeah, timing system, like someone having a laser, that's something you heard about that someone went somewhere, not that someone
Yeah.
you knew had one. And so as I started getting back into this, I had kind of stepped away from really training anyone outside of powerlifting for like a period of time right before I started this, as I was, just super focused on competing myself. And so as I came back into it, I started seeing like, Bird and Jared and different people. I saw Jared talking about like that they test monthly, and basically like if you don't, like how you know that you're getting results, like, and how does people know that you're not lying to them?
Hmm.
And like I'm not going to be afraid to do that. Like I'm going to do that because I want to know that what we're doing matters. And so from there, I got a speed tech. I looked at a bunch of different things. It was actually you that, suggested that would be a good entry
Hmm.
one. And so I bought it and, start timing the kids. At the time, we're just like out here in my driveway. So like we really can't run further than like, 20 yards, and maybe like a downhill, like a slight downhill fly, like 10 to 20, to kind of overspeed them. And, then we're going once a month somewhere and testing 40s. And as I got moved out of here at my own place, and we start testing more, that's when so I'm looking for things to, I know that the 20 is supposed to be a strong predictor. I'm looking up all these different charts as like, what they should be able to run. And I start to notice, okay, some of these kids are right on. They're like, pretty much what it says they're going to be, maybe a tenth of a second difference. And then some of them are like a couple, two or three tenths off, like, for what they should be running. And,
Hmm.
the difference of if you're supposed to run a 4.7, 4.8, and you're running a five flat, you go to somewhere for a college to look at you, that could be the difference of, you getting an offer and you not. And I'm like, like something's wrong. Like, why is it wrong? And
Hmm.
so then, I'll start, that's what like again, that's what made me reach out to Bird. And like I was sending him a video of one of my kids, and he's like, his, backside mechanics are, he's spending too much time. Like he doesn't have, and I'm like, okay, now I got to learn because I'm a football guy, right? I grew up playing football. We didn't even have track at my school until like my senior year. And it was kind of like one of those things where it was like not taken seriously. It was like a joke. Like you had to go erase your name off the list every day because someone
Uh-huh.
wrote it on there. Like, and so I start, looking into that and start looking into what kind of time should they be running on their back end. And it's kind of, it went from there. And then also with the jump mat, uh,
Hmm.
you know, seeing Jared use it and watching some of my kids, and this is still a thing today. Like a lot of kids today don't understand how to jump with intent.
Yeah.
It's almost like if they don't have a number on stuff that you're doing, it's like they can't conceptualize intent. And
Hmm.
so we had like a vertex, and I'm having them jump, you know, with resistance or some kind of other variation, and then jump on the vertex. But with the resistance, their jump wasn't very hard. I'm like, you're not jumping.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't grasp that. And so I luckily just somehow stumbled across one on Facebook Marketplace. I asked the person if they'd be willing to ship it to me, and they're like, yeah. And I had it shipped to me, and literally within a week or two, the verticals went up substantially because I'm like, okay, now jump with these dumbbells. And like the number was terrible. I'm like, see, you're not jumping very hard. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like the kids instantly got it. Same thing like
I've talked to two coaches today about that, like this morning, and I talked to somebody yesterday who was not thrilled with me for some reason, and they were they were quite upset about coaches who use jump devices of some kind. They weren't even uh, they weren't even spouting off at me about OVR in particular. They were just saying, like, well, how do these people think, really think that you can say that um, that an athlete can jump that much higher that quickly? And I was like, yeah, man, it's not that I'm like doing like I'm not doing anything. It's allowing with all technology. This is always my point to people. It's not for the coach 99% of the time. It's for the athlete to better understand what the coach said, because it allows the athlete to experiment a little bit and drive that intent, and like it pulls their focus away from the coach, honestly, and allows them to like just create some feeling around like all of the experimentation that they make rep to rep or set to set when they're given some sort of device that some sort of means to quantify their effort. It changes how their effort works, and it helps to speed up their learning curve so fast. um,
yeah,
so that's always what you see is it doesn't matter even how anyone trains that first week or two, like simply having the device is going to make them better, because then you really learn like how much is that kid actually even capable of like listening to me in the first place. Like you see this like massive acceleration in their outputs and what they learn and what they do, and you realize like, oh, I'm only like so effective as a coach because I've been telling them do that the whole time,
hmm
and neither could I really tell how much was, sometimes it's like you think the kid appears to be trying to you, and then you get something like a jump device, and you both realize like, oh no, there's a whole other level that this kid could have been hitting this whole time.
yeah. And same thing still like with the OVR velocity. Just this week, or it might have been last week, but I had a kid and we were doing squats, and uh, I wanted it to be like, explosive strength. Yeah, I'm telling him, you can't go up unless you move at a meter per second on average. And so he'd went up a couple times, and I kind of thought like the weight that he had got to with the amount of sets he had left was probably going to be like that. That was where he'd want to be for today, because like he's kind of hitting like high point eights once he went up again, and then all of a sudden he hits like a 1.2. And he's like, I really felt it that time. He's like, I could feel what you were saying, like, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And it's just like associating that what they feel with what they see, like you said, it speeds up that learning curve so much more than anything that you could tell them, I think.
Yeah, you have little epiphany moments like that where it's like you might have just rocketed that kid forward like 2 months of like standard, like uh, the standard rate of adaptation. Like you also are able to sort of get out of the way all of the things that are like cognitive or technical, or like all of the weaknesses that aren't a result of like sheer physical capacities and adaptations, like anything that could be learned that would improve. And now that kid can access, more weight, more stress at the desired speed, which means like now you've taken whatever that exercise was, whether it was a jump or a squat, and you've suddenly made it more potent in terms of a stimulus for the kid. Um, so yeah, those are always like that's the real exciting potential of any technology. Um, so what are kind of some of the like key discoveries, or in the past, maybe it's just that you've posted a little more recently, but like it seems like I know you touched on, you went out and you visited Bird. Um, ever since that, it seemed like your kids, are hitting on a different level, and so your kids have back end and top end speed. But what have been some of those other like kind of epiphany moments over the last few years? Like, what are some of the things that have stood out or have changed your programming?
So the one of the reasons I'm big on visiting people, and I tell people this, like especially when I visited Bird, knowing something, we didn't do anything differently necessarily than what we already did, but like knowing something and seeing how someone applies something, that's like, something like someone giving you a paint set and someone being an artist. Like seeing Bird in his environment and
Mhm.
seeing how he applied things, like it just opened my mind to like a whole different way of contrasting things. Like the way that we started to apply plyometrics and looking at them like as being paired with sprints and being like a potentiation for sprints, and the way that I looked at the ankle and the way that it was involved with sprinting and jumping, and the way I looked at strengthening it just completely changed from there. And then, uh, taking the trip to see Jared and the way that he strength trained his kids, I just feel like in the last little over a year or so, like, and like you said, it's a system. And it's funny that you touched on that because the whole reason I named my gym, what I did, Iron Saints Athletic Systems, is because I wanted to be about the athletes and the system. A lot of people, like to name their place after their last name. I guess is like a legacy
Mhm.
type thing, which I understand. But I wanted to be about the system and people to understand that if you have a good training system, like if you actually know what you're doing with training, that's what matters and that's what can make the difference in these kids. But I look at things as like us having a beginner and an intermediate and an advanced stage of training. And through doing all the things that I've done, I've just found a really good way of preparing the kids when they're beginners to get the fastest results, to switch them into intermediate to keep those results rolling. And now I'm kind of fine tuning that stuff as, like you mentioned Myra, of, when someone gets to that level, what do we do? You know, that's I
Mhm.
guess the fun thing on my end is like when you get someone that gets to a point where they can do things that you've never personally worked with or seen before, like then it becomes like this fun game of how do we go even further? And,
Yeah.
just learning how to input all those things into a system to, take a kid from need and okay, like now that, that base is built and, this beginner program is actually kind of starting to slow you down a little bit. Let's just switch gears and just keep right on rolling.
It's one of the things that I talk to a lot of people about is the sort of the like cosmic frustration of how long you actually get any given athlete. You rarely, in my experience, you know, I might get someone for uh I might have someone for 3 years, and within that 3 years there is probably going to be at least one or two stretches of, maybe 3 months where something gets in the way, something significantly derails their training. When I get somebody for, let's say, like 6 months, and they've got real aptitude and they really are like gung ho about the training, they're like on fire for it, as I like to say, like it's frankly like scary, because it creates this feeling of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. What's what does that look like in your setting when like when you get an athlete, how long you typically have them, and how, especially when you get an athlete who's kind of freaky, like what's do you ever get to have them for a sort of long continuous period, or is it kind of like, we're getting what we can get right now because that sports season's going to come up, or your family takes a big long vacation once a year or something, just a kid moves suddenly. That seems to be what happens with me a lot, is just a kid's 10 toes down, 100% in, and then something completely beyond their control happens, and suddenly, like that, they're gone.
Yeah. So if high school kids that come in, especially if like someone like her, like I didn't waste no time because it was one of those things like, I know it's summer. I know winter's coming that can potentially, in West Virginia, throw off like what we're going to accomplish. And then, as spring comes, I knew she had softball and she's going to be a senior. So, uh, luckily her school, most of the athletes that I have gotten from there have a pretty good base of strength. So, I just threw her, straight into like the intermediate stuff because I'm like, I had to get as much change, as much adaptation with this girl as I can, as quickly as I can, because I've seen that, she had something. I mean, she came in and broke the majority of our girls' records on stuff the first day, but I knew that there was a lot more there just watching her. I'm like, I can't waste any time. Like, we got to get it now. Now she's become like basically like a daughter to me. She's not going to be going to college that far away, so I know that she's going to be around. Uh, but with a younger kid, some of them, I have a couple kids, that's been there 3 years or more now, and they're like in middle school. So like I've been able to kind of take my time with them and build a big base, not like have to worry about like trying to go super fast. So it's kind of more like that. If it's a younger kid, I'm trying not to rush it. I'm trying to give them the development and the base. If it's a high school kid, we don't have much time. They have a big goal, then you know it's baptism by fire. Sometimes, like we got to get as much as we
Mm-hmm.
can, the smallest amount of time that we can.
What what are some of those strategies or modifications with the younger kids? Like, how's their training look different than the older kids?
So with them, like I'll actually still have them lift first. So like we're going to come in and squat or maybe do a trap bar. I still like to do a trap bar with those young kids just to kind of let them learn the hinge a little bit. I know that some people is like, well, it's still a squat, but you know, they can still learn the basics of hinging and picking up something from the ground by doing the trap bar. And then I don't let them uh, run as far as long as the month as the older kids. Like we hammer a lot of acceleration with them, like short stuff like 10-yard sprints. Because all the young kids, they want to stand straight up when they take off running. They don't understand how to lean, or someone's told them to stay low, so they hunch over because that's a bad cue that they don't grasp. So we spend a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time like just hammering acceleration, just basic linear kind of progression on like their exercises. Like, oh, you got all 5 sets of 5. Next week we're going to go up 5, 10 pounds, and you know pretty strict, just straightforward, like explosive mechanic Jared's jump style of like we're just doing dumbbell jumps and regular jumps. Like, you're not doing a bunch of depth jumps, or you know uh, some of the special stuff that you see bird do. I don't even necessarily know what you call like some of them we just call bird verticals like at the gym, because it's things that I've learned from him that doesn't really necessarily have a name. So, we're not going to do that. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to do like straightforward short sprints and jumps after our main lift. And then we're going to come back and we're going to hammer accessories, like kind of like uh, I can't think of the guy's name. He talks all Swede, mechanically similar movement. Like, we're going to come back and we're going to do like a pause goblet squat, or we're going to do like a demo deadlift to just reinforce, motor patterns and teach these kids how to move. And we're going to jump rope, and we're going to do bounds and skips, because like the rhythm and coordination of a lot of these younger kids coming in, it's just not there. They can't jump rope, like they can't
Mm-hmm.
bound, they can't coordinate their arms and legs together when they run. So like we're going to spend time just doing some really basic stuff like that until they get to a point to where, instead of like that lift being a potentiation, and me seeing them going from like sprinting better and jumping better afterwards, to where they've got to a point to where it wears them out, and like they're tired for their sprint and jump. Until we get to that point, then we're just going to keep hammering that basic stuff.
Mm-hmm. What what are the age ranges that you tend to get, like this younger group? What does that encompass?
So I ended up setting an age limit of 10, because I didn't really know where I wanted it to be. So for a while, I had taken a kid as young as 7, and it was
Mm-hmm.
never an issue of like, you know, you can just stay at a weight, like a light weight with a kid that young, and they'll still get stronger just using it over and over again. Uh, but it was just a matter of focus and attention, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to, one kid that's like extremely hyper at that age is like, I can watch them or I can watch the entire gym. And so I ended up setting it at 10. I feel like we get a lot of kids
Mm-hmm.
in like that 10 to 14 age range, uh, probably more so than above that. And then we also get a decent a bit of like college kids training for the first time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're coming back from their freshman year of college, and I guess they finally see what it's like whenever everybody's good, and they decide that they're going to come in and train.
Mm-hmm. Um, so then once they get into that older group, then what starts to switch? You said the younger group is just gonna dumbbell jump and regular standing vertical. Like, how's the jumps and the plyos start to broaden out with the older group?
So once we get into like those older, more advanced groups, like we're going to, like on the lower days, we're going to sprint first. Uh, and the sprint like is going to get longer, like as the month goes. So like,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of do like we do like a resistance sprint. How heavy it is depends on like what we're working on. If we're working on acceleration, it's shorter. It's going to be a little heavier. As we go more toward working on top end speed, like it's going to be like really light, just enough to where it basically slows the time down, but doesn't really change like how they run in any way. And then we're going to go from there. And then the jumps are kind of like, again, it's kind of what our focus is. Like, so if we're doing acceleration, our plyos might be like something that's more horizontal, you know, based, like standing triple jump or triple broad jump. Uh, we might do, we have the hurdles like the menu spoke of. So like the spacing will, be determined upon that. Like, the closer spacing for acceleration, and then us trying to hit that, the max spacing for top end speed, or we might be doing four jump if we're doing top end speed for like that vertical emphasis.
Hmm.
And then the jumps, I kind of, I'll let it dictate, by the focus of the day. Like if it's max effort, we tend to stay more of like a Jared explosive mechanics style jump, where if it's dynamic effort, then we go to more of a reactive style jump and do some of the things that you see Bird do, or, if we have a basketball or volleyball player, maybe make it more specific
Hmm.
to their sport with letting them do like the approach, or, if it's just a kid, if it's just something beneficial for everybody for any sport, like depth jumps, just something more reactive in nature on the dynamic effort day. And then we'll still do some normal verticals after that, uh, on that day, but we
Hmm.
kind of use that almost like as a potentiation for the regular jump, as well as just kind of strengthening like their reactive ability.
Hmm. So do you have those like systemized out, or is it more sort of on the fly, or in like almost in direct response to, like, are you kind of say to use like Jared and Bird as examples? Yeah, they're it's sort of similar logic. I kind of again, like, I would put you on that sort of spectrum as well, of like, if let's say like Jared and like Zach are kind of over here with more sort of like rigid systems, um, where the athlete is sort of being like led to the next step, versus like Bird maybe the other way, where there's a lot more variation, and um, it's it's a little more like, you might see something in that moment that causes you to go, oh, let's try this. And suddenly you're doing like a brand new thing. Are you like leading them to adaptation, or like kind of following and looking for the next thing?
It's kind of a mix. So like we have like a natural progression that we plan to go through the month with,
Hmm.
uh, with things. But also at the same time, like say that I'm seeing something in a kid that I'm like, have seen in the past, and I know why they're struggling with it, or, I'm seeing something that that they're struggling with, that I might immediately change that for that kid. Or if it's something that like I'm seeing in the gym, then I might just like make a switch there. And like for the next couple of weeks, okay, we were going to do this jump, but we're going to do this now. Like, uh, but so
There we go.
I was saying, like, summer before last, I think it was. I've seen a lot of kids having a lot of trouble. Like their vertical went up a lot, and then like they were having like struggling like with being able to handle that force that they were putting out. So like I was like, okay, we're gonna do like a
Hmm.
like a plyometric like depth jump. So we're gonna measure like your ground contact time, and we're gonna pair it with like an altitude drop. So kind of like, opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, if we're going to raise the altitude height if you can land and stick it good, and like for our other special jump, it's going to be like a really short drop and you try to get up quick. And so like because of things I was seeing, is like just on the fly made that decision and switched to that, and the whole gym did that for a while. That was, in that, intermediate and up group. And we saw an improvement, and there was a lot of kids that end up hitting PRs again on their verticals, like following that. So I feel like it's kind of like
Hmm.
I have a plan, but at any time the plan may change for an individual or for the gym based on what I'm seeing.
Yeah. I find like personally, um, I've got I've got those things that, like I don't want to give up. Yeah, I kind of like always am struggling between, it's like, again, sort of like that Jared, side where it's like, I know if we get this many exposures to this thing, that like it's going to predictably yield this result. And simultaneously, all of the good discoveries though are made when I deviate. Right? Like, you know, and I find that like with my more advanced kids, um, or really just with my most consistent kids, like I don't have a lot of hesitation in deviating. But if I've got a kid who kind of like comes in and goes out, I find myself to be like much more hesitant to like change anything up with them. It's almost like I want to be like, no, no, no. I know that if I deliver this to you, like the central sort of issue is just like, can I get you consistent enough? But then I'll have other kids who they've been coming for, maybe a year and a half, very consistent, uh, and then they'll have something, there will be some specific reason where, we'll come up with a different exercise because I'm trying to find something that like hits just a little bit different to teach them something, or to show them, to make them like literally feel something a little different. Um, and then if it works for them, then it'll start to get fed into like what everyone else does. Um, do you find, when you make those changes, like what's the process between when something gets added in for one kid or the whole? Are you are you looking, like, again, I'll be looking for like, especially if a kid's been consistent, I'm looking at it like my programming may have strongly contributed to whatever your issue is now. So now, like, that solution being like a something that's like on the menu as a systemic fix to like what a problem that I've in part created, versus like this is a one-off reaction to maybe like a very specific incidence
Yeah,
with a kid.
so I'm similar. Like I kind of use like the kids like Myra, and before her, like TJ was our first like athlete
Mhm.
that jumped to 36. He was our first athlete that ran a sub one, and so like even back then, all the kids called TJ a guinea pig because they'd see him doing all this different stuff. Because like I said, when you get a kid like that, it's like you got to take them a place that they've never been before, that you've never trained someone to go before. So I feel like you know you have to kind of experiment with those kids. If you keep doing the same thing, you're just going to keep getting the same thing. So things that I learned from working with him, became things that I did with other kids once they got close. And learning those things is what, I feel like has sped up our process. Like my guy that was the first ever kid I had to jump a 30. I remember he came and he visited uh, one day, and he was asking the kids like about doing something. They're like, "What are you talking about? We don't do that no more." And I was just like telling him like, "Well, you remember how hard it was for you to jump that 30? Like I had a kid like do it in 3 weeks a while back." And he's like, "Like what?" Like, it took me months. And so I feel like I
Mhm.
try to use those kids to pioneer the path forward for other people once they kind of get into those realms. And then there's the other two ways. If I see something going on in the gym and it's an issue for everybody suddenly, then I kind of look at it as like, you know, have we missed something? Like, do we need to put something in? Is there something that the training's not addressing? And then I also look at it as like, uh, just a cultural or environmental thing. Like a lot of the kids that come in, like I said, like there's this rhythm and coordination problem. Kids can't jump rope and do, simple things like come to me like that. And they come with very weak, hips, like, when it comes to like being able to like laterally move. So like we keep lateral drags and different things in the program because just from this area, there's certain things I've seen over the years that I know more than likely the kids are going to come in. It's going to be an issue for them. So I try to look at and make changes like that, like learning Jared's brief maximal tension. Uh, and applying it, and I've seen like really great results. Like I know that's going to be my go-to now for whenever our kids move from like a beginner to an intermediate, and that we're going to stay there for a long time until they get really strong to where I feel like they're at a place like where Myra or TJ is, where they're, trying to go somewhere where we haven't been before, and I'm going to have to give them uh, something different because I'm not exactly like Jared. Like I do run and jump my kids, closer to like what Bird does, and that's a lot more stress. So like one of the things that like as Meyer has gotten so fast and so strong is like we've kind of went back more to like a more traditional West Side style approach as far as like she has more of like a traditional max effort and dynamic effort day like whenever she's squatting, just because if not, then like she can't recover. It's especially during softball and track going on at the same time if we're going like that heavy.
Mhm. How do you, as you reach out and find new elements like that to put in, how do you, again, a thing that I've run into before where you learn about something new, you start to understand a component that someone else has been using. How do you balance or especially when it's not something, you're going to bring something in, but it might not be really like a core piece of what you do in the same way that it is, say, for somebody else. How do you balance what you want to keep versus what you want to
And I feel like
add?
that's like one of the hardest things to do. I usually try to start with just like a small group of kids and see like
Mhm.
how they respond to it. Again, like you talked about, like kids I know that are going to be there, kids that I know are going to be consistent, like that they're not going to be there
Mhm.
half the time. So I don't know if like they're being successful because like, you know, uh, they're getting like extra recovery or something. Uh, so the other kids are being pushed too much and I don't realize it. Uh, but it's really hard. I feel like that's the hardest thing is because like you don't want to take something out that you've had success with or, take too much out to
Mhm.
where like you get like a short like quick peak from it and then you fall off because you've taken too much away. It's always been like I feel like something I've struggled with is finding that balance of what's the right amount and what's too much. And I just try to look at it as like I said, like replacing one thing. Like if we're going to do this, what's the one way that I'm going to modify and introduce it to where I know for sure that like this is either a positive or a negative. And then over a period of not just like,
Mhm.
a few weeks, but a few months, like what's been the whole trend and effect of having it in there? Like, is it beneficial? How beneficial is it? How taxing is it? Like, is the benefit like so great that we need to take something else out so that it's less taxing? Uh, and I feel like that's, that's something that it's taken from the time, like I said, like that I went and visited Jared initially to understand like how I want to apply like the brief maximal tension. Since applying that, like our kids gotten super consistent with
Mhm.
their 40s being close together. Like when we run, like they're super close. Like like we've always had good progression, but like the like if we run 340s, they're all close together now. Uh, you know, there's less up and down in like
Mhm.
their jumping and their sprinting. But like I said, like uh, some of the like Myra, uh, Jared, one of my guys is like, getting ready to do a pro day. He's super strong. Like I can't squat him like that twice a week. you know, being a 600 pound squatter.
Yeah.
Uh, but for Myra, for instance, when we first started, I felt like that was part of what helped her rise so fast is having that in there. So it was kind of hard to be like, okay, now we need to kind of
Mhm.
switch. Like I know that this drove you to like this insane place so fast, but now we need to like switch what we're doing a little bit and find a new balance of like
What were the signs that you need? What were the signs with her that
her
you need to
legs started
switch?
being sore all the time and get
It stopped.
inconsistent. So like one
Mhm.
day she run 21,
How
22 miles an hour PR, her legs would be instantly sore, and then the next time we would run like her and jump, like her numbers would be down, like more than what you'd want to see them be down, like more down than just like I'm having an average day instead of a good day.
Yeah. So I guess that's one of the things that again too that I kind of struggle with. Like a lot of coaches are sort of they're either a speed person or like a speed first coach, or they're the strength first kind of the stereotypical like meathead type coach. Um, but you know, and looking at what you do, what you talk about, how you measure the efficacy of your training is very much through like the sprints and jumps, and how you simultaneously drive that is through very heavy, a very heavy weight room emphasis to get there. Like you're working on a car, like souping up the engine to make it go faster. And I'm the same way where like most of our adaptation is driven through the weight room and under the barbell, but it's measured. It's measured in our split times or our jumps. Um, so as a result, when I'm going to take something from someone, it's usually from somebody who has less of an emphasis in one of those two areas. Like if they've got an epiphany that I'm trying to follow, a lot of times they don't even attempt the running volumes that I want, that it's a part of what I do. Jared's kids don't run that much. Um, Other people don't jump that much. So like when you're adding things in, or how do you look at the volumes of everything that you do? Like what are your sprint and jump volumes like within a given workout or
So
a given
for a
week?
beginner, uh, if we're doing like a short, like if we're doing tens, we're gonna do probably 5 to 6 runs, and the first, typically 2 to 4 of those is going to be with resistance before we take it away, and then as we get out to longer, like with the younger, more inexperienced kids, we typically only do 3 flies if we're running like a longer top end speed type thing because over the years I've just seen like
Mhm.
almost like clockwork 99% of the time if we run a fourth one it's going to drop and it's going to drop pretty hard. uh And once the kids get stronger and faster, I typically like to stay with about 4 flies, like once we're out longer. Uh, and I'll let a couple of the kids do up to 6, usually not more than 6, because most kids, like, again, even if they're faster and stronger, after 6, I've rarely seen it be beneficial as far as like the time staying the same or getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then with the jumping, I kind of just, from reading Louis stuff and other stuff, I started with like, 20 jumps, you know, 10 with dumbbells, 10 without. And
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of try to stay with that as similar to that as like we go. So like I said, on the more intermediate advanced kids, like when we're doing like a max effort, focus type day, we're going to do that. But they're also probably going to broad jump on that day, like a couple of variations of broad jump. So like I don't increase the vertical volume because I know I'm going to have added volume of, doing broad jump work. And then on the other day, we're going to do like on those special, more reactive type jumps. Again, it's going to be like 10 total of those. There's usually going to be like a pairing, like I said, 5 and 5, and then 10 normal jumps. Uh, but with that, I kind of have auto regulation as we get up to into those groups. So like if we're doing special variations or weighted variations of something and they break their PR, then like we stop that and I let them do like whatever the unresisted variation is for the day and see if they can just drive it up. Uh, and then again, with some of the more advanced kids, some of the stronger kids, I'm kind of like playing with the idea of giving them less volume, kind of almost like, so in season, I cut those volumes in half
Mm-hmm.
for the kids. So, like instead of doing like 4 sprints, we might just do like 2 or 3. Instead of doing like, you know, 10 jumps of a special variation, like 5 and 5, we might do 3 and 3. Uh, I'm kind of messing with like some of like Jared and Meyer and some of them, like giving them less like that because it seems like once they get to like a place where they're, Myers jumped a 34-inch vertical on the just jump and like I think it's like a 30 point something or a 31 on the OVR. I'm like, you're at an elite level. Uh, you know, 4 max effort jumps or 8 max effort jumps for you is a lot different than 20 max effort jumps for someone who jumps a 20-inch vertical. So I've been, kind of experimenting with less
Mm-hmm.
volume as they get up to, that level on the jumps, kind of keeping the sprints the same, at least, for her because, we're transitioning to track. So, it's literally going to be her sport is sprinting.
All right. So like, as you again knowing that you're familiar with Louis, his thoughts were always like the stronger you get, the more volume you need to support that strength level, right? Like, and that's like there's a double-edged sword to that of like, you again, it's kind of one of like the principles of conjugate is you need a certain work capacity to support the attribute, and at the same time the training for it, like the building that capacity and that level of volume creates its own fatigue, um increasing. I guess how do you increase work capacity, or do you even worry about that? Like how does that happen within uh within your system? Does it just happen over time by itself, or do you consciously monitor it in any
So,
way?
with the, beginners, like I said, every time that, they're able to get all their reps. Their form's good on like their squat and stuff. They go up. Uh, when they first start on bench, like they have to be able to get 10 reps on their last set. Before we're going to be able to go up because like beginner they can go up 5 or 10 pounds on bench and miss it. So like I want to make sure that they can, at the end of their set that they can still get, you know, we've been doing sets of 5. Okay, last set you gotta get 10 or more. If you can't get 10 or more on this set, then we're not gonna go up because I know that like strength wise you don't have enough in reserve to go up. And then as they move to to that intermediate group, like there's just kind of an increase in volume built in. They're getting more exercise. They're introduced to reverse hypers, which all the kids hate for some reason. I remember growing up like that was like a unicorn, like if you were somewhere that was had a reverse hyper. So it's like one of those things like try to add 5 or 10 pounds each week to your reverse hyper. They're getting more exposure to more sprints, more exposure to more jumps. Uh, we're doing brief maximal tension, so like they're kind of having a natural wave and progression on their main lifts to that, and their secondary lifts. And then as they get to like again, it's that advanced group that is like it's so weird to try to regulate that volume because how do you regulate volume of a virtual force like sprinting and jumping? You know, like every muscle group is getting a different amount of force it's having to handle that is not easy to account for. So I kind of just I try to look at it as just completely through the lens of performance. Like, is the athlete telling me they're tired? Are they staying sore? Are their numbers inconsistent? Like, what do we need to do to get them to break through to that next level once they're already elite? And you know, with those kids, I've kind of seen like when they get to a certain point, taking a little bit more away from them and just kind of keeping it the absolute bare necessities of what you need in the weight room for them to progress is seeming to having a better effect than just trying to increase, volume in there as well.
So I guess in addition to all of that, how are is your sprint and speed work? Um, do you venture out into any change of direction or agility or uh, like I guess how far into the sort of um, softer or sort of less linear um, kind of attributes do you go
So we
with
do
y'all's
that.
training?
I like kind of Tony Holler's approach as far as like X factor type stuff. So like kind of like the end of the week upper body day, like we'll have like sometimes both upper body days, depending on like how much time we have and how experienced the kids are. We'll kind of do like stuff like Tony Vellani talks about of like you know different angled cuts and teaching the kids how to control their speed, or maybe like a 5-5 shuttle, or maybe just like skater bounds, or something like that, or maybe even like a skater bound or an ISO into like one of those things like afterwards, like kind of pairing them together, uh, or like alternating like hurdle hops. We do that because we do test, you know, 5, 10, 5, and 3 cone as part of like our uh, monthly testing. So we do work on that stuff. We do, venture out into that stuff. Uh, and it's kind of just like
You do a lot of technical
I
work with
try to
it?
teach the kids like how to control their speed when we're doing like the cuts and stuff. Like I can understand that, like, when they're going so fast and they're having to like chop a bunch and slow down, that they're just like working against themselves. Like I try to teach them how to like set up their turn, like
Mhm.
control their speed, and then come out of the turn fast. Like that way they understand like how to create separation, how to control their body, like how that they can be uh, smooth within those movements. Uh, and we just kind of we'll like some of that stuff that we can time, and like we'll kind of do it until it gets to a point where they can't drop it anymore, because I feel like uh, you know there's no reason to just beat it to death, but at the same time, like you can do a fair number of those and not really worry about overly fatiguing a kid.
Mhm. Um, is there anything like uh, what lately has been the sort of thing that you've maybe not, fully integrated into your training yet, or what's like the thing that's piqued your curiosity, maybe the next like thing that you want to take a deep dive on or find an
So the
expert in?
main thing that I'm messing with right now, that I've kind of seen a few different times now, and I'm really working on it with Myra, and I'm gonna be starting to work on it with like some of my football guys, who are wanting to run like some really impressive times, as they are going to places to be timed, whether it's for trying to get looks for college or a pro day or whatever. Is like doing, instead of doing fly tens, doing fly 20s, and having a more holistic approach of not staying on like we kind of do like a long the short approach for our intermediate kids, but of finding a way to balance out like acceleration and
Uh-huh.
top end speed and the qualities for it, uh, together. I actually have like this week like been like writing out like how I want to do things with Myra, and how I want to like the whole approach of like max effort day being for max velocity, and for speed day being acceleration. And
Hmm.
one of the things I've learned is like after a while, after a kid gets so fast, they can be fast in just about any like fly 10-yard section. But like how long can you hold that speed? And that
Uh-huh.
becomes like the thing to like running like these super impressive
Yeah.
times, is like it's not about holding that speed for 10 yards. It's like, can you hold that speed for 20 yards or 30 yards or 20 meters or 30 meters, or however you want to look at it. So it's becoming that's been like things that I've been implementing, of like being able to hold that speed for a longer period of time, and how do we go about working that to where we're not peaked and have like a really fast uh top end speed that we can hold decent without, and but like maybe being like a tenth off of our best acceleration, like figuring out how to peak both of those at the same time, and being able to hold both of those for like a longer period of time.
So, uh, so I'm hearing just basically like you're almost just gearing your skill set more
I
towards
really,
like track,
yeah, I really like track.
basically, like, or
Yeah, I really
the
like
qualities
track,
for track.
and with some of my guys too, like before, again in the past, even for football, like one of the things I seen was like as we started getting guys around that level of like they're capable of running a 4.5, of you gotta be able to
Hmm.
put it all together on the same day. You know, it's kind of like the old powerlifting thing. Like just
Yeah.
because you can squat this and bench this and deadlift this, it doesn't mean you can total this. Like, because you got to do it all on the same day, right? And you
Right.
you
Right.
you learn over years of powerlifting. Well, if I want to be
Yeah.
able to total this, if I want to be able to total 2100, well, I actually need to be able to total 2300 to make sure that it's there on any given day.
Right.
And so I'm learning like, well, just because they can run this fly 10 doesn't mean they can run this 40, or just because they have the capability of running this 20 in the beginning and this 20 at the end doesn't mean that like it's going to be there both together at the right time. And so like I'm starting to look at like
Yeah.
ways to change how we do our sprint and what we measure with our sprints to teach the kids
Hmm.
uh, basically how to hold their top speed longer, and how to make sure that they're
Hmm.
best in acceleration and at top speed at the same time. Because I do like track. I don't have a lot of track athletes, but regardless of whether they're being timed for a 40, or they're going to a 100-meter race, like I want them to put up the
Hmm.
best time possible. You know, the like I've already said a couple times, like if you run a 4.70 or a 4.59, that's a completely different way that you're getting looked at for, the people that you're in front of for that day.
Yeah, I love track. And I've very recently there's a great long jump and triple jump coach out here. Um, there's a couple Olympians who train locally who I've gotten to go out and just the other day, like I was at one of their practices and just watching um literally just being at the track and watching them jump. This kid here, that was the 25 5.5 long jumper in high school. Um, and he was a upper 23 kid when he started training with me, and not to, again, I didn't train him at all out on the track, but I know what happened in the weight room. I know, he went from a 185-pound box squat to 365 off of the same box. And he weighed, probably 130 when he started with me and probably 145 when he left. And, somewhere along that way, 2 extra feet on what was already like a state champion level jumper to become, the best in high school that year and the best in the state of Florida ever at the time. His record, I think, has been broken by half an inch since. But like I was looking at it, was like, well, there was there was so much more. Like again, like we ran out of time together, and it was like we just like scratched the surface of like the sort of horsepower and in the weight room type stuff. Um, but he was so much more elastic than all these other people that I worked with at the same time. And now seeing these jumpers, and I was just talking to another a local high school coach who's uh, you know I look at mile split in the athletic
That
uh, at the times every year, at least a few times, and I saw like at this one high school where I literally charted out like at all of my area high schools for a 10-year stretch, like how common was a sub 11 sprinter, just period. And it was like, well, at this school over here, they average about 1.25 a year. And then all of a sudden you look up and it's, well, this year they got 5. What happened? And it's like, oh, new coach. And, it's like they got 5, and go look at the ages of them and they're all ninth and 10th grade. Yeah. Working with track athletes, once you start to venture into the speed component, um, and especially if you start to get some actual track kids, it's like what's more fun than working on a
yeah,
40 is working on a 60, because you can melt, like you can do, if you can take 2/10 off over here, well, I can take 3 or 4 off over there. And then you go like, well, it's more fun than a 60, like a 60 yard, like a baseball kid. It's like the 100. and then especially because you've tooled around with like um,
Hmm.
the wicket
Yeah.
system from Bird, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like once you start to combine like those things of like, all right, I'm going to start affecting their stride. I'm then all the that's where like all the hurdle hop stuff from me comes from. Like, okay, I want to improve that elasticity and kind of going down that route. Like as you said, you like looking at fly 20s now. So what I did, um, I have a thing in my spreadsheet where I look at the ratio of their fly 20 speed over their fly 10 speed. So I look at like sort of that index of like what percentage of your speed. And I notice like there's my elastic kids will be like 98, 99% of their speed will carry in a fly 20. And then my inelastic kids, it'll be like 95.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, so somewhere in there's a you start to see like, oh, I can put all of my elastic kids are over, they're like north of 97, 98, and like I think it's I haven't looked at it in a while because I haven't had enough room to do the fly 20s for a while, but it was somewhere I believe the sort of like line of demarcation was around 97%. um but yeah, looking at that, and then like in the track community, fly 30s are the big thing. But yeah, when you put all of it together, like the raw strength and power, and especially when you can like fix the ankles, and then you start to, you know, I tell kids all the time, like with the wicket system, like I say, like at some point, if we're doing like 5 steps, I'm like, one of those 5 steps is your fastest step. So like if the wickets weren't there, you would, let's say like your stride length was 7'2", and that was your fastest step with your longest stride, and it was also your quickest ground contact. And then because you weren't elastic enough, your next step you didn't create, that ground contact was so short that you didn't create the tension to propel yourself into the next step for 7'2". So you fell down to 7 foot, and your ground contact started getting long again, and you were losing speed now. And I'm like, so you ran 21 miles per hour, but one of those steps was
Hmm.
like a 23 mile per hour step. So you've already done it, and now like, can we just do it back to back? And now you've got that 23 mile an hour step twice out of and now can we just do that back to back to back? And now it's like your time just melted down. We didn't actually make you one bit faster. We just made you repeat and bounce through what you were already capable of doing. And now let's get you just a hair faster than that
Yeah.
and repeat that. And like, yeah, track is so much fun. Um, I wish that certain people would really get into to training track folk. Uh, who like certain people.
I
I
didn't
don't know
have
if you
30
can read my
shirt. I knew
shirt.
you meant.
Um, yeah, yeah. I wish Jared would have fun just like one time with like 100-meter kid, or shoot up in his area. Like they have indoor, right? So they have like 60 meters during the winter. And it's like, man, I wish he would just get one kid who was like, oh yeah, I'm also like a competitive 60-meter kid, and like go win a really big meet with that kid, and then suddenly get really excited about like, yeah, screw it, I want
Yeah.
the 100-meter title too in the spring, and let's roll that through AAU, and let's because there's a whole world of eh, yeah, I look at all the time, like and talking to coaches who are not from the U.S. in the track world, the coach I was talking to the other day, he's from the Bahamas, and he's saying like how appalled he is at how there's all these American track athletes like at the high school level. He's like, none of them lift. It's, like, just what are we doing if, like, you spend all this time out at the track and then you aren't backstopping it by like getting strong. So yeah, there's an entire world out there that sees strength as being integrated into speed in a much closer manner than like is popular on American social media. Connection issues, but I think that's a relatively good stopping point. I'm still new to hosting a. It turns out these podcasts are a lot shorter when I'm not doing 90% of the talking. That's what I realized is I'm like, oh, other people can answer questions much more direct and succinctly than me. So what I guess where can people find you, and do you have any services or anything that the public at large outside of West Virginia can, how can we interact with you or support you if we're not
So
in
we're
your
on
city?
basically all the main forms of social media. Just Iron Saints Athletic Systems on Facebook. Iron Saints, I think it's Iron Saints _ Athletic Systems on Instagram, and then Iron Saints, I think it's just like ATH on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it now. I don't get on Twitter a whole lot. I let you and Zach fight with people on there. I don't have the energy to fight with people on Twitter all day, like especially with some of the
I don't
stuff.
do too much
Oh,
fighting. People call me. I don't fight too much on Twitter, at least not anymore. Some people try and fight with me. I don't really fight back. I just
yeah, I
kind
can't
of smile
put
and
up with
laugh.
some of the stupidity that I see on there. So I just kind of mainly just share my athletes stuff on there. I do a podcast as well. I'm kind of new at it. I haven't hosted a lot myself, but I do have one. Uh, it's on Spotify, Apple, Acast, and we have our own YouTube that we put them on as well. So.
All right. And what
So
city
we're
are you
in
in again?
Logan, West Virginia, and then I live. So the county is Logan, where my business at is in the city of Logan, even though the county is named Logan. Uh, s- so
Mm-hmm.
relatively small, yeah,
So
little small
Logan, West Virginia.
place in southern West Virginia.
Yeah. Those are, small towns. I'm in Tallahassee, which is sort of, I guess, on the upper end of, for Florida, it's looked at as a small town, at least. But yeah, man, I have to get up in your neck of the
We have
woods.
not
We haven't
I've
met in
not been
person,
able
have
to
we?
actually get anywhere. Like, were you at West Side when Khalil and them visited that time? Oh,
No, no. They asked me if I wanted to go, but
yeah, I was
for
about to
some
say
reason
I
I couldn't go up
wanted
that
to, but I
weekend.
wasn't able to go that weekend either. But yeah, we'll definitely have to get together. Uh, I try to go somewhere and visit every
Yeah.
summer. Maybe I can convince my wife to visit Tallahassee.
Yeah, Tallahassee's a hard one. We're not in an exciting part of Florida, and we're not along. Like Tallahassee's pretty easy if you travel like east to west. Like if this is your means of travel, getting on I-10, you know, Jacksonville to Santa Monica, basically, like, um, that's the main route that takes you by us. So if you were like trying to organize a trip between like New Orleans and Jacksonville, or New Orleans and down to Disney or something, or South Florida, I'm right there. But for people going more like north south, yeah, Tallahassee is a difficult place to get to because you hit over through like the 75, and then you got to come back an hour and a half, or you go down that way to like Pensacola, and then you got to come back 2 hours. So we're just not very, or you just take nothing but tiny little country roads south from Atlanta for a few hours. But yeah, at some point we got to get in the same space. I have a lot of relationships like that where I'm like, I've talked to this person for a decade, and I'm like, I feel like we must have met at some point, but no, it's just voices and like little profile pictures. Um, but yeah, man, thanks again for coming on. Yeah, I don't know when this will come out, and I hope that all of the technical struggles here. We're apparently getting really bad weather here in the next couple hours, but yeah, hopefully everything is recorded up to the cloud, and when it all comes together, the audio is good on both ends. Um, so this has been another episode of Burn the Ladders, conversations about strength and speed and athletic development and whatever the hell else I'm just rambling about at the moment. Um, but so yeah, tune in, join us again next time. Thanks.
Appreciate you having me on, man.